Sam, if you wanted to go to the next slide, please. So our agenda for today, we're going to start with some introductions, see if anybody wants to share, and then we will go into the April feature updates from Power BI, which will be presented by Sam for the first half. And then the second half will be presented by Isaac, part of our data team on ArcGIS, Power BI Visual, and Azure Maps. And then we will allow for Q&A towards the end. If anybody has any questions during any of the presentations, you are welcome to pop the questions in the chat and somebody can answer them. You can unmute yourself and hold them till the end, whatever works for you, but we will definitely answer them. And then, Sam, did you want to go to the next one, please?
Yeah, will do.
Thank you. And then this time, so sometimes we start with some introductions. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and kind of share their name, the company or industry that you're working in, and then any recent Power BI challenge or something that you've been working on. So if anybody wanted to start, you are welcome to. I'm Gina. I'm the events coordinator at Tallan. So you see my name sometimes in a lot of the email invites and on Meetup. And I don't really too much Power BI. I've dabbled, but it's really it.
Yeah, I can share as well. Hi, everyone. My name's Sam Kelly. I'm a senior consultant here at Tallan working in our data and analytics team. I'd say a recent BI challenge that I've run into is being reactive instead of proactive in terms of proper data architecture and governance of data. It becomes a real challenge when, you hit the limits of not having those in place, and ultimately, you have to be sort of reactive to put that in place to fix issues rather than, trying to set that groundwork earlier on, which ultimately, in my eyes, if you set it early, you're saving yourself some pain and a lot of time. So that's about it for me.
Yeah, I can go ahead too. My name's Isaac Leem. I have been with Tallan for just a few months now. I have a background in government, healthcare, and the agriculture space. And my role here is a data and analytics architect. One of the recent challenges I've had is working with a client on, repackaging Power BI to really use that as a sales tool for them, something that they can, kind of wrap their own, their own brand in, and then serve that up to external clients. And how do you go about doing something like that, right? There's some proprietary information there, and using this tool beyond just for data and reports for your own internal applications, but also serving it up to other customers. Like I said, using it as a sales tool and such. So that's one of the challenges I faced recently. But welcome, and hope to hear from some of the other folks that are here too as well.
Thanks, Isaac. Did anyone else want to unmute and share?
Sure, this is Jaime Alba.
Hi, Jaime.
And kind of the main challenge that I have is sometimes the databases that we're trying to integrate within Power BI are really complex, and it's really hard to get the information out of them to understand the tables and know where the information that you need and that you're looking for really is to point it to the right table.
I see a lot of head nods, so I'm thinking other people might think the same thing.
Yeah, very similar to what I shared on.
Yeah, and that's that kind of transition from not just being, a data and analyst in the sense of creating these dashboards and reports, but also getting embedded with the business to really be a business intelligence expert. And that is a hard, line to cross. And it's not always easy, and it's always different from each company, right? Some companies are much better than others about telling you how their process works or creating that story, where you can go after that data. And then also having the people on the back end that can point you towards that data. And create that story for the users that need it. So definitely sympathize and empathize with your challenges there.
Awesome, thank you. Did anyone else want to share?
I'll share.
Sure. Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome. My name's Scott Maxwell. I'm from AAA. And I think, as everybody's already said, some of the challenges that I have is basically data modeling and making sure that things are one to many. And then I also think like, oh, I got to get the star schema right, and all these things that I always like kind of overthink. But it's also those important things that I have to make sure that they're actually done, because then when I try to do DAX, I'm like, this isn't working. It's because your model's not right. So definitely those are some of the challenges. And it's my first meeting, so I'm happy that this is going on for sure. I'm in Western Mass, and Hartford was the closest, so I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
I could go next. Jared Brown, VP of the Data and Analytics practice here at Tallan. Scott, I definitely sympathize. The modeling is definitely one of the most important things to get right first, because it makes everything easier after that. So definitely good intuition on focusing on that. The one challenge I'll share recently, and something that a few folks on our team have encountered, is as Power BI is maturing and new features are coming out, sometimes those features in isolation are really easy to understand, but then sometimes when you start combining them and are expecting them to work nicely in concert, you kind of have to know what some of the limitations are. So kind of working through some of those more advanced scenarios, enterprise composite models, aggregations, row level security, do all those things work well together in all circumstance. That's definitely a fun one. So
Thanks, Jared. All right, last call. Did anybody else want to share?
Hey, Gina. It's Paul Akampora from Yale New Haven Health.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
Good. And I think I've spoken with some of you recently, so the names all look familiar. At any rate, I'm the manager of the server infrastructure team, and we're in the beginning stages of Power BI and the deployment of it, and trying to move some of that to the actual Azure components. So I don't know what the real challenges are, other than us getting enough knowledge to push it out in a safe way. That would be about it. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for sharing.
All right. If there's no more introductions, I will bring us straight into the feature updates here for the month of April.
Cool. Thanks, Sam.
No problem. So just to start, I split the feature summary up into a couple of different areas. If you've read the April feature summary as well, not every update is going to be included here, just sort of some of the ones that I thought were sort of core updates. So I split them into reporting and data preparation, service, and other. We'll be looking at reporting and data preparation first, the first one being the new formatting pane. This feature was still in preview as of April, and it was moving to GA in May. I believe now there is no way to opt out of it. Previously there was, but I believe everyone has the new experience now. I'll go into a bit of what it looks like and give just a short demo of it in a moment here. So I'm not going to go into all of the changes now, but I will in a moment. The next subject would be tooltip support for drill actions on matrix, line, and area charts. This is a preview feature currently, and it's something that you have to opt into. I'll show you where you would look to opt into that in a moment as well, and show sort of what that looks like from a visual perspective. This one I personally think is really cool. I find that sometimes folks new to Power BI do have a hard time understanding where to go to do a drill through or a drill down function when they're looking at a report. So definitely an exciting one from a user experience perspective. The next one would be updates to required permissions when using composite models on Power BI datasets. The title of this one is a little confusing. To try to provide some insight here, the composite model that we're referring to here on Power BI datasets is meaning that there is some combination of different types of connections in the Power BI dataset, being import or direct query. But the key here is that some of the connections that are being made are a live connection to a Power BI dataset that's published to the service. Now, previously, the way that the sort of permissions worked here were users who were consumers of a report based on a composite model dataset that references a live Power BI dataset in the service required build permissions on that dataset, or that's being referenced behind the scenes. So it's either the build permission, or they could have contributor permissions for a dataset, or rather its workspace. This in general is a little bit overkill from a viewer perspective, because the build permissions or the contributor permissions are either going to allow you to edit the data set that's behind the scenes, or be able to build your own content with it. Sometimes that build permission can be useful if these viewers are trying to create ad hoc reports. So that configuration of it isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the contributor permissions on a workspace level does expose those viewers, the ability to go in and potentially change the way that a data set is, modeled. They could create new measures, they could delete tables. So there is a bit of a security risk there. This has been changed now, but sadly only for Power BI premium based data sets. Now, in the case of premium, the consumers will only need viewer access to consume this type of report. So you're sort of eliminating that potential security flaw in who can edit a data set. And it just makes sense from an access standpoint to have it that way. Hopefully they roll this out for non-premium workspaces as well, but we'll see what happens in the future. But definitely a really great update that's going to eliminate some security concerns in terms of Power BI datasets. I guess the other point to make there is that it's sort of cascading access. You can give the viewer access on the composite model that you're creating, but there also has to be that access configured on the datasets that are being referenced behind the scenes. So depending on how complicated your model is, that could be a lot of different places to go and add permissions in Power BI. So it's definitely making this a lot simpler, and hopefully improving overall management of access here. The next setting that we have here is error bars for clustered column and bar charts. This one is in preview. I'll show a brief image later of what this looks like and talk a little bit more about it, so we don't necessarily have to go into it right now. The next one would be Bookmark Navigator History. Now, the title of this one was a little confusing as well, and I'll show a visual of sort of what this looks like later as well. But the key here is previously, if you were using a Bookmark Navigator, and if you're not familiar with that, I will demonstrate what that looks like to put that in a report. If you're using a Bookmark Navigator, previously you were only able to select one value at a time, essentially meaning, if you had a bookmark that for a sales report that's broken down by country, you might want to see, USA versus Germany, for example. Previously, you'd only be able to select one of them. And if you had, say, a time dimension that was associated with that and some bookmarks to filter down to specific time periods, you would only be able to select either the country or the time. Now they have added the ability to select multiple bookmarks at once. I think there will be some limitations here in how this works. If your bookmarks are going to completely separate pages, this functionality isn't really going to be useful for you, but it will be useful in a scenario where you're just looking to apply filters to one page in a report. So definitely a really cool feature as well. I think right now you can only select 2, but I think this will probably change very quickly to allow more and more bookmarks to be selected. And like I said, later I'll show a brief image to support, what that might look like. Then we have dynamic mQuery parameters. This one is also a very interesting feature in my mind. I'll be showing an image of this later and talking a little bit more about sort of what this is and what the benefits of the dynamic query parameters are. That's about it for reporting and data preparation. Under the service side here, we have some Power BI goals enhancements. There is now the capability for bulk updating. Previously, you were only able to update one goal at a time. Now you can select multiple and make changes to, I believe, the due date, owner fields, and if you want to delete, you can sort of bulk delete goals here. From Microsoft, they're saying that more updates are coming to support more bulk updating functionality with other fields related to these goals. I think in the month of May, so there may already be some new ones out there, but this is something that's going to continue to grow. Power BI goals still are fairly new, so they're only going to get better and better as we go. Then we have also some updating on the sharing and access banner for the goals. So there's essentially a landing page for goals where you can go and manage the goals that you've created or owned or associating to folks. The benefit here now is that you'll be basically indicated when goal owners do not have access to the scorecards that are related to those goals. Previously, you could do it on a goal by goal basis to see who had access, to make sure that the owners of the goals did have access to track them through their scorecard. Now, it'll tell you up front that those people don't have access, just making the overall experience a little bit easier and sort of, helping you be proactive and making sure that folks have the right access to track their goals. Then we'll talk a little bit about some of the other section here. There's some new Windows 11 support. Nothing super crazy here. There's some new theming for Power BI here. Nothing super groundbreaking. There's also some Power BI mobile updates. So there is mobile formatting options supporting visual interactions. So what this is you can think of a slicer, for example, in a mobile report. There's now support for, specifying sort of default options for your slicer in mobile, as well as allowing folks to use that to filter down a mobile report view. So overall, just improving the general experience with the mobile reports in Power BI, which is always great. And then the last one we have here under other is just goals push notifications in mobile. So now there is push notifications for both goals being associated to someone, as well as comments being made on goals that might, be related to who the goal is assigned to. So just some additional tracking to help, support some updates through mobile. So always nice to have some additional sort of need there to help people track their goals. All right, so we're going to go into very briefly, before I go in here, we're going to look at the new formatting pane for Power BI. So the first benefit that we get here is previously this visualization section would stick when you clicked on the formatting tab here. Power BI or Microsoft is really trying to make this user experience with the formatting pane a little bit better. So now when you click here, you simply only see the formatting options. They've sort of broken this up into two separate sections now. There are a general settings section and a visual settings section. Essentially what we're seeing here is the general settings are settings that are shared across all visualizations for Power BI, things like, your title, any tooltips, alternative text, general properties for a visual. These are all going to be under your general tab. You also have the visual tab here, which are going to be settings that are specific to a visual. So in this case, I'm looking at a map visual. You'll see that I have map settings here, bubbles, category labels, heat map settings. This will always be different for every visual, but essentially it's making it easier to manage the visual specific settings here. Now, another cool thing that they have here is they have an option to revert all settings to default. So, if you're messing around with your settings and you want to get back to your original state, you do have the option to click this format pane settings, which is really just this ellipses here. And this is going to give you some options. You can reset all the settings to default. You can expand all the categories if you want to see sort of a similar experience as the old formatting, and you can also collapse all the categories here. So just a couple features for user experience that have been updated. Another one here worth pointing out is in the past, when you would open sections in the formatting settings, you used to see, and I'm going to expand them all here. What you used to see is there would be sort of doubled up scroll bars on the right here. There would be one for each of these sections. Now, instead of having doubled up scroll bars, there's one singular one that allows you to sort of scroll through here. The last update to shout out for this, which isn't super groundbreaking, but it is useful, is they've tried to sort of make these toggles for the settings more compact. Previously, what you might have seen is you would see that like advanced options, for example, would get cut off and you wouldn't see all the text associated to the section. Now they've tried to make it a little bit better such that you can see that without having to increase your visualizations pane size here, which overall allows for a better experience in developing reports because you can shrink this window a lot smaller and still be able to understand the settings that you're looking for here. And I think that is about it for what I wanted to show from the formatting pane. One last thing I do want to show here from a report standpoint is how you get to any of the preview features. So if you're not familiar, you do have to opt in to most preview features. The way that you go about that is by coming to the File option at the top left of Power BI Desktop, choosing Options and Settings, choosing Options, and then you're going to get a pop-up here for the options. Under this global section, you'll see there's a preview features section. This is going to allow you to opt into different preview features, and it will require restarting Power BI Desktop once you've opted in. So you can see here, like the error bars that I shouted out earlier are one of the settings here. Similarly, the field parameters are here as well. If you wanted to make use of them, you can opt into it here. Additionally, there are some map visuals that are included here, might be relevant to what our feature presentation later, but just worth shouting out. When we get around to looking at the tooltip support for drill actions, I'll talk a little bit about how to enable that as well. It's a little different from what we're seeing here, depending on the approach that you're taking. So we'll look at that in a moment. But for now, I will go back to the presentation and we will look at the tooltip support for the drill actions. So just to demonstrate quickly, actually, the old experience here, what you would see when you look at a tooltip here is it gives you some indication that you can right-click to drill through or drill down. Similarly, you can drill down with the options at the top left of most visuals that have sort of a hierarchy that you want to drill down into. But it wasn't exactly obvious for folks unless they were hovering and saw this section how they were meant to go and get to a drill through. So once you right click, you'll see you have a drill down option, a drill through option that you can use. But the new experience makes it a little bit cleaner and easier to find. So when you're hovering over a section that has an applicable drill through or drill down, you'll now get it in a tooltip style here. One thing worth shouting out is previously when you try to hover over a tooltip, it disappears. That no longer happens now. You can move your mouse over it and get to the drill down or drill through options. Definitely a really great thing from a user experience perspective. You know, I've seen many cases where people struggle to get to these options. But you know, this will definitely improve their experience. Now, teaching people what to drill down and drill through, that's another story, which I won't get into. But yeah, definitely a really cool update, and I'm looking forward to using this. So one thing worth pointing out is there are a couple of different ways that you would enable this option, and it differs on sort of the beginning state that you're starting at. So let me just give me one moment here. So there are three ways to go about it. One is for new reports that you're creating in Power BI Desktop. So for a completely new report, and I'm going to be showing it here with an existing report, what you would want to do is exactly what I showed earlier. You'd come into the options here, choose the preview settings section, and you would see a section here for modern visual tooltips. You can see I don't have it here because this is an existing report. For an existing report, rather than going to the preview features section here, what you would actually want to do is scroll down to the current file option, which you see there's a report settings section at the very bottom. This section, and I may have the wrong version of Power BI Desktop here, so I apologize. We're not going to see the setting here. What you would see is under this developer mode section, there would be a modern visual tooltips checkbox where you simply would want to check to enable it for an existing report, and that would enable you to use the new drill through option. Lastly, the last option through the Power BI service, I won't be showing here, but essentially what you would need to do is, and I'll show it in sort of in a screenshot from Microsoft, is you would have to come into your report in the Power BI service, open file settings, and you'll see here there is a modern visual tooltips section where you can go and enable that for a report that's already been deployed to the service. So yeah, just you need to be aware of sort of what scenario you're approaching this from in order to enable it correctly. And I will send this link in the chat for anyone who's looking to do this. There's essentially a couple of different guides here for how you may want to enable this. So yeah, definitely a useful link. And I will go back to our presentation here, and let me send that in the chat. All right, so we got a couple more to look at here, which should be fairly brief. One being error bars for clustered column and bar charts. This in particular, I really just wanted to show what it looks like. But what it allows you to do is to drag upper and lower bounds into sort of a box in the analytics pane for a visual. If you're not familiar with the analytics pane, I'll just point it out here very quickly. You have a magnifying glass when you have a visual selected here next to your formatting options. This is going to give you analytics features. Unfortunately, the visual I've chosen here doesn't have them, but what you would see is sort of error bar, lower bound, upper bound, where you could drop in values to specify how your error bars should work. This in particular, is useful for visualizing a range that's going to represent some uncertainty in the values, which could be, a confidence interval. It could be a standard error. It all depends on how you configure it, but definitely a useful feature that I'm sure we'll see added to more and more visuals going forward. Next, we have dynamic mQuery parameters. So this feature has been in preview for a bit, but it is now generally available. The main benefit of this is in a direct query scenario where we want to limit the amount of data that's getting pulled back by direct query, ultimately improving our report load or rather data load performance, and even report visualization performance. So in this case, the color options that you're seeing here are what are tied to our mQuery parameter. So in this case, we have blue, multicolored, and red selected. Essentially, what's going to happen behind the scenes is when the query, when a query is run in the background to go and get this data, it will not grab all of the colors. It's simply going to look for the ones that we have selected here, ultimately reducing the amount of data that we have to pull back, which is always beneficial from a performance standpoint. And there's a couple other pieces on here just worth pointing out. The Q&A feature will also utilize your mQuery parameters here to give you sort of a more tailored view, and also use that same sort of benefit of query load time. So you'll see here they're specifying they wanted to see average list price by color, and the only colors they see are the ones that are selected here. It also works in decomposition trees as well. So definitely a cool feature. Great feature to improve your report performance if you are using direct query. And I'm going to move on here, but this one, I personally think is one of the most exciting ones that got released in the month of April. The last one here is the Bookmark navigator history. I just wanted to show sort of a visual that would show what this would look like. So really quickly, just to show how you would create a bookmark navigator, under the insert option here in Power BI Desktop, you have a buttons option. Under this, at the very bottom, you'll see if you hover over navigator, you have the option for a bookmark navigator. This by default is just going to add all the bookmarks that you have in your report, which you'll see, we have quite a few in here. But essentially, this allows folks to click on bookmarks without having to open this bookmarks pane and select these bookmarks, manually. It's going to act more like a slicer in a way. You can also create groups here to specify what bookmarks you do want to see in the list. I don't have any groups, but you would see more options than all here if you did create some bookmark groups. Now, the way you would do that is by selecting multiple bookmarks here, clicking more options, selecting group, and you'll see now if I close this out, and it doesn't look like it's updating, but what you would see is you would have a group one option under here as well to only show specific bookmarks. Now, back to sort of this view, the benefit here, in this case is that they're looking at trends across different countries here, and they may want to also look at timeframes. So in the past, you would either be able to select one of the three for Europe, Japan, or US, or rather one of the 6 of these bookmarks, and that's how you would be able to sort of look at the data, is by a singular bookmark standpoint. The new functionality will allow you to select multiple. So for example, if you wanted to see the Europe trends and you wanted to look at it from the roaring thousands, you could select both of those and be able to get sort of a more filtered down view of your data, and sort of combine and generate more ways to look at your data with these bookmarks rather than just sort of a singular standpoint. So definitely useful in a user experience standpoint. It's going to reduce the number of bookmarks you potentially need to make, and reduce the number that folks who are consuming these reports might make for themselves as well. So overall, just a general user experience upgrade. And that is about it for me. If there are any questions, I think we can handle them in the Q&A area. But thank you for listening to me talk about the feature updates for today. I will pass it off to Isaac now for the feature presentation.
Great, Sam. Thank you so much for all those updates. I know it was just a little shy of the May update, so we weren't able to cover those, but those are a lot of useful ones there.
Definitely.
If you could, Sam, can you share that slide deck one more time, and just go start at my slide for a second there. So yeah, really what we're trying to do is leave you guys with some nuggets here to really take back to your own companies and maybe create some maps of your own. And if you have a little trouble, you can always contact Tallan too. So hopefully we can kind of get through this quickly here on the different things that we're going to review. It's really all about ArcGIS maps and map styles. One of the biggest reasons I love maps is because there's really almost no context needed. You need a little bit of context for your data, but everyone knows a map. They know where they exist on the map. You know, they've seen their geographic location. You know, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri. So, you know, for me, I know exactly where that's at. So, that's one of the biggest things versus, you know, a bar chart, a line chart, a dashboard. All those things do require context for that to understand really the data you're looking at, sort of understand the KPIs and the metrics. And with maps, you kind of eliminate a lot of that context and only need a little bit of context for the data. So we're going to review sort of the ArcGIS map styles, plotting the data, adding public service layers, adding personal service layers, and then I'll just briefly go into some of the Azure Map and their previews. Azure is really working to be, I think they're integrating a lot with ArcGIS, but they're looking to spin up their own services with Azure Maps and Bing to, you know, create an enhanced experience for those looking to kind of take it to the next level within their own applications. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. This is mostly a demo. Thankfully, I don't have a ton of slides here because for me, slides get a bit boring. I'm more of a I want to see it sort of person. So really, I'm going to start out with this kind of screenshot here of provided by the ArcGIS and kind of tell you guys about maps and their different sort of layers here. There's really essentially 6 layers to a map. There's this base map layer, which sort of draws the map. Then there's the tile layer, which adds that, you know, kind of the height and the width and some of the geographical terrain to a map. Then you have the polygon layer, which that's your traditional sort of shape map where you can draw different polygons and at different shapes. This would be like a geospatial file that would draw this. The same thing with lines. Then you have your streets, your railways, your, you know, types of modal transportations here. That's also GeoJSON. And then you've got points, right? So that's all your dots, or, you know, you think about Google Maps when you're going from point A to point B. I'm going from home to work, or, you know, work to school, or whatever else. You would have these points, right? You know, and then from there, there's some of the graphic settings like images, or I want to take those points and turn them into something else. So that's really the 6 layers of a map. And what ArcGIS allows you to do is not really manipulate these 2 base layers, even though there is some sort of canned layers that you can use for this tile layer, but really manipulate from the 3rd layer on up all the way to the 6th layer. So that really opens the opportunity to customize your maps in a way that gives your users you know, a great experience here. So I'm going to go back to Power BI here, and I'm going to show you how to build something similar to this. So right here, the data I'm using today is from the National Agriculture and Statistical Services data. So my prior role before Tallan was working in the agriculture industry and analyzing crop trends, intermodal transportations, railways, and really how to get corn, wheat, soy, all those types of crops from point A to point B, because they're all pretty much grown, especially for corn. It's grown centrally here in the United States, also known as the Corn Belt, and wheat is actually grown more in the upper kind of north central to north western point of the United States. There is a lot of wheat grown still down here in Kansas as well as Nebraska, but the majority of it is grown in North, South Dakota, Minnesota, and even over into Montana. Also, soybeans is part of this analysis. So I just pulled the top 3 crops grown here in the United States. So really what I'm going to do is take you through sort of the journey to create something similar to this. And one of the limitations I've noticed of a lot of maps too is that they only allow you to plot one data point. And if not, you have to pivot your table, create a union, create categories for those things, and maybe show one or multiple, you know, different categories of that data at once on a map. Well, I feel like ArcGIS kind of broke those bounds by allowing you to host layers too as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start out with a new pane here. The ArcGIS is automatically included with all of the maps. You don't have to go into preview mode and download them. With Azure Maps, you do have to do that, like Sam pointed out. But with ArcGIS, we're going to head and click and drag and drop our map here. You notice it already linked myself to this account. What you'll need to be able to do to take advantage of some of these enhanced features is just create a free account. It doesn't cost anything. You can sign up for some additional services, premium features to really take advantage of sharing these in your Power BI services. But for development and sort of one-off analysis, it works really well with just a free account. So that's great news. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag my latitude and my longitude here. And as you notice right off the bat, it just kind of drops all the layers right here, right? So there's really no difference in size. I'm looking at this on a county level, so it's showing this at the county level of really almost every county because there's some wheat, corn, or soy grown in nearly every county in the United States. So from there, what I'm going to go ahead and do is look at the total bushel yield. So I'll drag that to size. Now you can see where it's primarily grown. I could drag in some filters here too as well. So I'll look up at commodity code. I want to slice and dice by that. I'll turn it into a filter. I'll resize this as well. And then I could multi-select between each one of these to kind of see where that crop particularly grew in the United States. So as you can see, like I said, with wheat in the upper territories, some grown down here in Kansas and then Nebraska as well, and definitely some over here, it looks like in Washington State. So I've created some of those layers, and this is, this is kind of that base layer where you're using your own data that lives in this visual to plot these points. But, what if I really want to enhance this visual a bit more? There's some public data out there that's really great. So, all I have to do is after I've created that account, you can come drag this hamburger menu down. You can go into settings, and there's this layer feature or reference layer feature. You can click on that. Now within my ArcGIS, I've already saved some content in here. So for instance, I've saved this network rail map that someone online had created that color codes and splits up the different railway networks across the United States. So I can take advantage of some of that public data. I can just add it in right here. So as you notice, I've added in that railway data and I can see all these different railway points now on the map as well. It's drawn it's taking care of that geospatial layer here to draw those railways. And I can even zoom in a bit further and click on some of these railways too. So I can see this is the Union Pacific Railroad. There's some information that's not filled in about it. But I can kind of zoom out then and it highlights everything that's part of the Union Pacific Railroad here. Right. So then though, I'm still kind of limited. I'm using some public data, but I can only use still one reference layer at a time here. So how do I go about really getting in more data? I want to see, crop yield, but what if I wanted to see where all the railways live at on each one of these rail lines? Because again, it's about moving it from point A to point B, understanding capacity of different railways. And from that point, I can understand how long it'll take me to move, corn or wheat or soy from say central Kansas on out all the way over here to California. And that might take a bit more business knowledge, but at least I can do a rough estimate based upon the railway and its capacity to move through these rail lines and so on. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is in ArcGIS, you can create a developer account too as well. That's free. And I'm going to go ahead and import a data set. So I'm going to select a file here. I already have a file here I'm going to select. So I'm going to grab the CSV. I'm going to drag it and drop it into there. I'm going to upload the file into here. You can see as it already recognizes some of the column headers in there, and it'll map the coordinates to the lat long points. I'm going to hit next. It identifies the data types. I could change some of these items, but I'm going to leave them as is, but it identifies each column level, almost like running an SSIS import package. I can give it a title, give it some tags if I want to make it public, easier to find. I can give it a description. And I can create the layer. You can see that uploaded and published pretty quickly here now too. I can also change the settings of this layer. I can make it private or public. I can create different access tokens for my organization if I want to have other people take advantage of this, but I don't want to share it publicly as well. So there's some of those features in here. But now I can see it down here in Power BI. I can go out of this tooltip again, grab the reference layer, ArcGIS, and look at my content, and there's the rail elevators. So now I have more than 2 points on my map now. I have my crop data as far as yields, and now I have all these different rail lines on here. Obviously, though, at this point, this doesn't look all that pretty. And if I go over here to these things, if I look at rail elevators, it doesn't allow me to really change the symbology about it. Versus the coordinates, I can change this to say a heat map style. And I have some of those options to manipulate my local data. Well, how we get around that, because this, again, looks a bit ugly, is I'll come back up here to the services. I can go to an untitled map. And this is just, you go to arcgis.com, you open up their map layer, and I can look at my favorites or my content. I can add it in here actually up to this layer. Then I can edit the layer style. I can do styling options here. I can edit them. Let's see here. I can adjust the size. I can, let's see here. I think I have to drag in a field. I'm just going to grab in a field. I can style it by a certain column here too as well. We'll leave. There we go. Now it enables the fill. So now I can change the fill of it. I'll just do black for now. And then after, since I have it black, I can actually save this visual right here on this map and keep it as black. So I go here to save. I can save as. I can call it my rail elevators. I can save it. I come back over to my visualization over here. I can remove this layer. And I can add in a new reference layer, ArcGIS, and there's my rail elevator saved. And now as you see, I have all those points and you can modify them however you want. There's some sizing adjustments, different things like that. So for each one of those, you can add in different coloring options as well and add those to that. Now, a dynamic feature then too is you know, a lot of people think like, okay, I've got these things in the services, but now really what I want to do, I'm just going to copy this chart over. Is I wanted to be able to filter my local data. I'm going to scooch this guy over a little bit. Just going to paste this visual in here. Do a little resizing for a second. And now, right now, with my local data that's in there, which is my total bushel yield. It's not populating appropriately now. There we go. Well, there we go. I can grab my coordinates, transition them to the bottom there. Now, what I can do though, instead, because right now, if I filter on top of some of this stuff, it'll filter that local data, but it's not filtering my these black points here as well. Well, I can tie them together. Like I told you before, I have, you know, at the county level, I have this data set at. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for these railway points as well. So at the county level, instead here, I can actually take a reference layer or a join layer here, and I'll join it on county. So I'll put county name here as a join layer. I can come over here to my layers here. I can click on this ellipses for my rail elevator, and I can join a layer. From there, I can join the county name, and I have county in here as well. I can create a join. Now what I can do is I can multi-select, say, a certain area. So I'll kind of zoom in, and just for sake here, I'm going to pull these coordinates out. Well, click on this, remove my total bushel yield here. And so now for my coordinates here, I can select a few different data points. And as you notice, as I click and drag these few different data points, what it'll do is it'll filter this chart too. And if I want those interactions to be a bit different, I could edit the interactions instead of filtering this, or instead of just highlighting this, I'll change it to a filter. So now you can see those reference points of the data that I have out in the cloud are now filtering based upon that join to county name the other data sets that I have over here locally. And you can create up to 5 joins for each layer too as well. So I can remove this join. I can unhighlight some of this stuff here. The other part that's interesting too as well is instead of just taking advantage of the join layer, I can also find similar, right? So let's see, let me unhighlight some of this stuff. Rail elevators. I will, sometimes it doesn't always play nice right away when you're going through doing all these different steps. There we go. I'm gonna remove this join again. Now instead, I'm gonna remove this join layer, but what if I wanted to get similar yield locations too as well? So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this layer again. I'm gonna go back to sort of that layer I had with the crop yield. There we go. And now what I want to do is I want to find similar regions by their total bushel yield. So I put that in there as well now. Now what I can do, let's go to coordinates. I'm sorry, it's not coordinates. It's actually under the settings toggle here, the settings wrench. Instead of reference layer, you go down to find similar. So if I want to find locations that are similar, I'm just going to pick something random here. I can click on this specific lat long, which is coordinated to a county, and I can run an analysis. And it finds the other areas 1 through 10 of the most similar crop yield based upon total bushel yield here as well. So that's kind of to take advantage of most of these added features that people don't really utilize a lot in ArcGIS. I can clean that up and take that out of there. Click off of it, and I'm kind of back where I started. I can add in some of my other layers again if I'd like to, but that's really to try to take advantage of a multiple layer, including public data sets like these rails and private data sets such as the rail lines and the rail elevators that I showed here as well. Now, finally, real quick, I know we only have a couple minutes left here, so I just wanted to briefly go over some of the stuff that Azure Maps has to offer too as well. Obviously, you go to that, File, Options, and Settings, go down to Preview Features, and enable Azure Maps Preview. It's still not on a preview yet, and I don't think there's an ETA as far as when it's going to be out of preview that I've seen. But they are trying to make enhancements, like I said, to complement and compete with something like ArcGIS or Google Maps or some of the other maps that do really well for this as well. So I'm going to go over to Azure Maps on here too as well. And Azure Maps is a little like Murphy's Law though right now at this point. If it can go wrong, it kind of will go wrong. Azure Maps takes a lot to render. I've done these sort of data bars, and I feel like it's nostalgic of, 3D data bars that came out with an Excel whenever it first came out. And so I just kind of showed this though because it's an interesting feature in comparison to most of them have bubble plots or something to that effect where you can change the symbology of it, but they don't really have this data bar, so I can get a good look to see, okay, where for the crop year I can filter it by say 2019, and I'm looking at the crops that are grown in 2019 and where they're grown the most. I can obviously filter by any of these commodities such as corn or soybeans or wheat. I can filter by my state or any other codes I have in here, fields I have in here. I can pivot this too as well to look at a more on top view. And at that point, these data bars aren't as good. I might change it to, say, a pie chart of each one of these different counties, or, one of those bubble plots with the different sizes based upon yields. I could tilt this back too as well. There's some options to change, the type of map you're looking at. So I can change it to a satellite map. There's hybrid, grayscale. There's several different map options. But where I think the power at for Azure Maps really doesn't lie in its Power BI features quite yet. It's really made to be its own standalone web application service. And I'll go through some of that real quick here. Let's see. Over here this is their Azure Maps samples. So they have about 290 different samples of SDKs that you can actually plug into their web app. If you deployed this map in their services in Azure, you could take advantage by activating some of these services in here. And I'm not going to go through each one of these because there's several, but I am going to keep with the theme. So in agriculture, right, there's different routes that big semis have to take versus cars. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is look at this car versus truck route. And so, for instance, here, I could run a sample and just sort of look at this. I'm just going to use their generate feature since I don't have any options here, but you could enter in, say, certain options of your truck, the length and height and weight, the load type, whether, explosives, compressed gas. There might be something along the lines of, corn, wheat, and soy that don't have some of those attributes that you have to take other roads. But I'm just going to do like a low bridge scenario, which it plugs in some coordinates for me, looks at the vehicle width and height, and it says, okay, here, a car route could take the red. So that's a much shorter route versus the truck route would have to take the green. That's a much larger route. But, this really activates those features and would be good for truckers to have to see, okay, because they get paid, in say a per mile basis. So, from here to here, you might quote them on that, but really they had to go around this way. And this can get a bit more granular as far as what the truckers could see and what they could bill for too as well. Again, just staying in the theme, but you can come out here. I can link this in the chat as well. And you can come out here and see the different samples that they have and ones that you could integrate with Azure Maps. So at this point, I don't really have anything else to show you guys. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation and want to take this back and maybe create some maps of your own. Is there any questions?
That was awesome. That's all I have to say. It's really cool. All those different layers and how you can configure them. I've never got down to that level of detail, but I can definitely see how that's super useful.
Right.
I like the retro reference to Power Map in Excel.
I know, I kind of saw it. 3D bars only had a small life, in the 90s, and after that, I think people sort of forgot about them and used something else. But they're going back to it for a little bit.
Well, I think if we don't have any questions, then we will let everyone go. But thank you, Sam and Isaac. As I had mentioned before, we will send the recording tomorrow. There will be a link in the chat, but you guys won't be able to access it. It's just for internal only. So we'll make sure to pop it on YouTube and share it with you. And thank you, everyone, for coming and spending your lunch with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.